So this is not necessarily about prison radicalization. This is about providing good and proper prisons. Now, of course, situation in Western countries is nowhere nearly as bad, but even in Western countries, there are badly run, overcrowded prisons. There's anecdotal evidence, at least, of this being taken advantage of by radicalizers and recruiters. Point number 3, prisons everywhere, prison services everywhere need to become more ambitious and more sophisticated. And the two, ambitious and sophisticated, are not the same, but they can be. They can go together. They need to be more ambitious, especially in the West, because with just one exception, Western countries practice a security-first and indeed a security-only approach when it comes to terrorist prisoners. The idea is to lock people up, make sure no one ever hears about them again. And that's understandable, perhaps, and with some people that may be the right policy. But there are also many who could be reformed, and in most cases, it isn't even tried. There's an entirely wrong idea out there that the imperatives of reform and security are contradictory. In reality, they more often complement than contradict each other. One example is that of what we call aftercare. Many Western countries, many people who have been convicted of terrorist offenses will be released back into society. And for example, in Britain, in the next years, a significant number of people will be released back into society. They will go back into their communities, back perhaps to their old friends. Is that a good idea? Often it is not. Wouldn't it be a good idea to spend more time and thought on aftercare, making sure that people have a productive and meaningful future after leaving prisons, that they can build something new for themselves, that they don't have to return to their old friends that got them into prison in the first place? That's good reform, but that's also good security. And that brings me to my 4th point. What about those individual de-radicalization and disengagement programs, like the ones we have seen in places like Singapore, in Yemen, in Indonesia, in Saudi Arabia? And indeed, we are examining 6 of these programs in our report. Big note of caution here, and that's my 4th point. DRAD programs can't be studied in isolation from the conflict in which they are being implemented. Their success depends on the wider political environment. That indeed is a mistake, I think, that a lot of researchers have made in looking at these programs. They only look at the program, they don't consider the broader context in which these programs are taking place. Take Iraq, for example. Most people believe that the de-radicalization disengagement program that was implemented in Iraq in 2007-2008 was a success. And they are saying this is a blueprint that should be copied and implemented everywhere. I would argue the very same program, the exact same content, implemented in the same country, in Iraq, just 2 years before, would almost certainly have produced entirely different results. Reason, of course, is that the political situation in Iraq 2007-2008 was entirely different from the political situation in 2005-2006. In a nutshell, the communities to which these people were returning to had turned against al-Qaeda in those 2 years, and that, I believe, made a significant difference. And that makes me skeptical about believing that these programs are the panacea in some of the most war-torn societies, whilst the conflict is still going on. My final point, point 5, is a simple one, namely that no one size fits all. When it comes to individual de-radicalization and disengagement programs, there are, of course, certain principles that apply everywhere. Sophisticated, successful programs always have a mix of different kind of programming. Vocational skills on the one hand, ideological re-education on the other. They always have credible interlocutors, people who can relate and talk to prisoners. They always pay a lot of attention to aftercare, making sure that people, when they are being released, don't reoffend. That's true for all the good programs. But what exact shape these programs take, how they are being implemented, that differs from country to country. Saudi, for example, the prison authorities are working within the tribal system. In Singapore, and Burhan, I think, is in the audience, he will be able to tell you more about this, it is the prisoners' families and professional organizations who are looking after the prisoners after they are being released. In many Western countries, some of these systems wouldn't work. And therefore, the big warning to government policymakers is don't read this report and look for the blueprint. Don't look for the model that you can take and implement in your society. That model might work, but it works because it is adapted to that particular society. That is very important to keep in mind. So please pick up a copy of the report. Please read it carefully if you're in government. Prisons are places of radicalization, but if we understand the opportunities and act on them correctly, they can be turned into net contributors in the fight against terrorism. Thank you.